Lady Alara Blackwood pressed her back against the cold stone wall as footsteps echoed down the corridor. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The marriage contract in her trembling hands felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She had 3 minutes to reach the chapel before her father's choice of husband claimed her forever. 3 minutes before she became property instead of a person. The footsteps grew closer. She closed her eyes and made a choice that would change everything. When she opened them, Lord Marcus Ashford stood before her, his dark eyes filled with surprise. "Help me," she whispered, and thrust the contract toward him. "Pretend to be my fiancée, just for tonight, please." But what started as one desperate lie to escape an unwanted marriage would spiral into something far more dangerous when the king himself took notice of their supposed engagement. Marcus stared at the beautiful woman before him. Her golden hair had come loose from its pins. Her green eyes were wide with fear. He recognized her now. Lady Alara Blackwood, daughter of one of the most powerful lords in the kingdom. What was she doing hiding in the shadows like a common servant? "What exactly are you asking me to do?" he said quietly. The footsteps were getting closer. Whoever was looking for her would round the corner any moment. "Lord Pemberton is coming to collect me," she said in a rush. "My father promised him my hand. The man is twice my age and cruel to his servants. I cannot marry him. I will not." Her voice broke on the last word. "If he finds me with another man, if he thinks I am already promised to someone else, perhaps he will give up his claim." Marcus felt his chest tighten. He knew Lord Pemberton's reputation. The man went through wives like horses, working them to death with his demands and harsh treatment. No woman deserved such a fate, especially not one so young and full of life. "And what happens when he discovers the truth?" Marcus asked. "When he learns this engagement is false, by then I will have found another way," she said desperately. "I will enter a convent if I must. Anything is better than marriage to that monster." The footsteps stopped just around the corner. A gruff voice called out, "Lady Alara, your father grows impatient. Come out, girl. Your betrothed awaits." Marcus made his decision in an instant. He pulled Alara against his chest and wrapped his arms around her. She fit perfectly in his embrace, as if she belonged there. Her sweet scent of lavender and roses filled his senses. "Kiss me," he whispered against her ear. "Make it look real." She tilted her face up to his. Their lips met just as Lord Pemberton rounded the corner. The kiss was meant to be for show, but the moment their mouths touched, something electric passed between them. Marcus felt as if lightning had struck his very soul. From the way Alara's breath caught, he knew she felt it too. "What is the meaning of this?" Pemberton's voice boomed through the corridor. Marcus slowly broke the kiss, but kept his arms around Alara. He turned to face the older man with a calm expression, though his heart was racing. "Lord Pemberton," he said with a polite nod, "I was just celebrating my engagement with my beloved." Pemberton's face turned purple with rage. "Engagement? This woman is promised to me." Lord Blackwood signed the papers himself. "I am afraid there has been some misunderstanding," Marcus replied smoothly. "Lady Alara and I have been betrothed for months. Perhaps you should speak with her father to clear up this confusion." Lara pressed closer to Marcus's side. She was trembling, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "Yes, my lord. Marcus and I have been secretly engaged since the spring. I apologize if my father led you to believe otherwise." Pemberton's eyes narrowed. "I do not believe this for one moment." Blackwood would have mentioned an existing engagement. He stepped closer, his hand moving to the sword at his hip. "You are lying, both of you." Marcus felt Alara tense beside him. He squeezed her waist gently. trying to give her courage. "Are you calling Lady Alara a liar, my lord?" he asked softly. There was steel in his voice now. "That would be most ungentlemanly." "I am calling you both liars and frauds," Pemberton snarled, "and I will have satisfaction for this insult." "Then you may have it," Marcus replied. "Name your weapons." "Marcus, no," Alara whispered, but he shook his head slightly. "Swords at dawn," Pemberton said with a cruel smile. "When I run you through, girl, you will be free to marry me as planned." Marcus bowed formally. "I accept your challenge. Until dawn, then." Pemberton stormed away, his boots echoing angrily on the stone floor. Marcus waited until the sound faded completely before releasing Alara from his arms. She stepped back immediately, wrapping her own arms around herself. "You should not have done that," she said quietly. "He is known to be skilled with a blade. He has killed 3 men in duels." "And what would you have me do?" Marcus asked. "Let him drag you away. Allow him to call you a liar without consequence. I would rather face marriage to him than see you die for my foolishness," she replied. Tears sparkled in her green eyes. "This is all my fault. I should never have involved you in my problems." Marcus felt something twist in his chest at the sight of her tears. This brave, beautiful woman was willing to sacrifice herself to save him, a man she barely knew. It made him want to slay dragons for her. "You are not foolish," he said gently. "You are desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. I would have done the same in your position. But now you might die because of my desperation," she said. A single tear rolled down her cheek. Marcus reached out and brushed the tear away with his thumb. Her skin was soft as silk beneath his touch. "I do not plan to die, my lady. I have too much to live for now." Something flickered in her eyes at his words. Hope, perhaps, or something deeper. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I find myself quite invested in this engagement of ours," he said with a small smile. "Even if it began as a lie." Color rose in her cheeks. "Sir, you cannot mean what I think you mean." "Can't I?" He stepped closer. "You asked me to pose as your fiancé for one night. What if I told you I would be honored to make it real?" Her lips parted in surprise. "But you barely know me." "I know enough," he said softly. "I know you are brave enough to fight for your freedom. I know you are kind enough to worry about a stranger's safety. I know that when you kissed me, it felt like coming home." "Marcus," she breathed, and he loved the sound of his name on her lips. "Think about it," he said. "If we marry, you will be free of Pemberton forever. And he paused, hardly believing his own boldness. "I will be the luckiest man in the kingdom." Before she could respond, they heard more footsteps approaching. These were lighter, quicker. A young woman in servant's dress appeared at the end of the corridor. "My lady," the girl called urgently, "your father seeks you. He is in a terrible rage." Alara closed her eyes briefly. "Of course he is." She looked at Marcus. "I must go face his wrath, but what you said, I will think about it. I promise." "Wait," Marcus caught her hand as she turned to leave. "What is your answer about tomorrow's duel? Will you let me fight for your honor?" "Do I have a choice?" she asked, with a rueful smile. "The challenge has been made. But Marcus, please be careful. I could not bear it if something happened to you." "Nothing will happen to me," he promised. "I will win, and when I do, perhaps you will give me your answer about our engagement." She squeezed his hand once before hurrying away with her servant. Marcus watched until she disappeared around the corner, then leaned back against the wall. What had he gotten himself into? An hour ago he had been a simple lord with no particular attachments. Now he was engaged to a woman he barely knew and facing a duel to the death with one of the most dangerous swordsmen in the kingdom. But when he thought of Ilara's smile, of the way she had felt in his arms, he knew he would do it all again without hesitation. The next morning dawned grey and misty. Marcus stood in the courtyard behind the castle, testing the weight of his sword. He had chosen his own blade rather than one of the matched pairs traditionally used in duels. This was not a formal affair but a matter of honor, and he wanted every advantage he could get. Lord Pemberton arrived with his seconds, looking confident and well-rested. The man was built like a bull, with thick arms and a barrel chest. His sword work would be powerful, but perhaps not as quick as Marcus's own style. "Where is your lady love?" Pemberton asked mockingly, too ashamed to watch her champion fall. "She is exactly where she should be," Marcus replied calmly. "Preparing for our wedding." It was a lie, but it had the desired effect. Pemberton's face darkened with rage. An angry fighter made mistakes, and Marcus was counting on that. "Gentlemen," called Lord Pemberton's second, "you know the rules. First blood, or until one man yields." "First blood?" Pemberton laughed harshly. "I think not. This cur has insulted me beyond forgiveness. We fight to the death." Marcus nodded grimly. He had expected as much. So be it. The two men faced each other across the misty courtyard. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. Somewhere in the castle above, Ilara was probably pacing her room, worried sick. He could not let her down. "Begin," called the second. Pemberton attacked immediately, his blade whistling through the air in a powerful overhead stroke. Marcus danced aside, and the sword bit deep into the earth, where he had been standing. He countered with a quick thrust toward Pemberton's ribs, but the older man's chain mail turned the blow. They circled each other warily. Pemberton was strong and experienced, but Marcus was younger and faster. The key would be wearing down his opponent's strength while avoiding those crushing blows. Pemberton came at him again, this time with a series of quick cuts aimed at Marcus's head and shoulders. Marcus parried desperately, his lighter blade ringing against Pemberton's heavier sword. One blow got through his guard and opened a shallow cut on his left arm. Blood began to seep through his shirt. "First blood to me," Pemberton crowed. "Yield now, boy, and I might let you live." "Never," Marcus panted. He pressed his attack, using his speed to strike at Pemberton from unexpected angles. His sword point found gaps in the man's armor, drawing blood from his sword arm and thigh. The older man roared in fury and charged like an enraged bull. Marcus waited until the last second, then stepped aside and brought his pommel down hard on Pemberton's helmet. The man staggered, but did not fall. They fought for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Both men were bleeding from multiple wounds. Marcus's arm was beginning to go numb, but Pemberton was breathing hard, and his movements had slowed. Marcus saw his chance when Pemberton overextended on a wild swing. He stepped inside the older man's guard and drove his sword point between the plates of armor at Pemberton's shoulder. The blade slid deep, and Pemberton's sword fell from suddenly nerveless fingers. "Yield," Marcus gasped, his own sword point at Pemberton's throat. "It is over." Pemberton glared at him with hatred, but he was clearly defeated. "I yield," he said, through gritted teeth. Marcus stepped back and lowered his weapon. His legs felt like water, but he had won. Ilara was free. "The duel is concluded," announced Pemberton second. "Lord Ashford is victorious." As the small crowd began to disperse, Marcus saw a flash of gold at one of the upper windows. Ilara was watching after all. Their eyes met across the distance, and she pressed her hand to her heart in a gesture of relief and gratitude. Marcus climbed the stairs to the main hall, his wounded arm throbbing with each step. He needed to find Elara and learn her decision about their engagement. But first, he needed to convince her father that the betrothal was real. Lord Blackwood was waiting for him in the great hall, his face thunderous. The man was tall and lean, with iron-grey hair and cold blue eyes. Marcus could see where Elara got her strength of will. "So," Blackwood said, without preamble, "my daughter tells me you are her betrothed. Funny, I do not recall giving my consent to such a match." "My lord," Marcus began carefully, "your daughter and I—" "My daughter is a headstrong girl who thinks she can defy my will," Blackwood interrupted. "But I am curious about you, Lord Ashford. What makes you think you are worthy of an alliance with my house?" Marcus straightened his shoulders, despite the pain in his arm. "I have lands in the north, a good name, and no debts. More than that, I love your daughter and would cherish her as she deserves." "Love," Blackwood spat. "What has love to do with marriage? Marriage is about alliances, about strengthening bloodlines and increasing wealth. Pemberton offered me a substantial bride price. And what did he offer your daughter?" Marcus asked quietly. "A life of misery and early death. I have heard how he treats his wives." Something flickered in Blackwood's eyes. "You think I do not know Pemberton's reputation? You think I would truly give my only child to such a man if I had any choice?" Marcus felt a chill. "What do you mean, no choice?" Blackwood moved to the window and stared out at the courtyard where the duel had taken place. "Pemberton holds my debts, Lord Ashford. Every penny I owe he has bought up. If I do not give him Elara, he will demand immediate payment of sums I cannot possibly raise. I will lose everything, my lands, my title, my honor." "How much do you owe?" Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. 20,000 gold crowns, Blackwood said heavily. "A fortune I do not possess." Marcus felt his heart sink. He was wealthy by most standards, but not that wealthy. His entire estate was not worth half that sum. "Perhaps we could work out some arrangement with Pemberton." "There will be no arrangement," Blackwood said firmly. "The man is vindictive and cruel. After today's humiliation, he will be even more determined to have his revenge. If he cannot have Elara as his wife, he will settle for destroying our family entirely." The great hall doors opened, and Elara entered, still wearing the same gown from the night before. Her face was pale but determined. She had heard every word. "Father," she said quietly, "is it true about the debts?" Blackwood's shoulders sagged. "I am sorry, my dear. I thought I could handle it quietly, find another way, but Pemberton was too clever for me." "Then we will face ruin together," Elara said firmly. "I will not marry that monster to save our fortune." "You will not have to," Marcus said suddenly. Both father and daughter turned to look at him. "There is another way." "What do you mean?" Elara asked. "The king," Marcus said, his mind racing. "If we can get an audience with King William, if we can convince him to take an interest in our case." "The king?" Blackwood laughed bitterly. "What would His Majesty care about the debts of a minor lord?" "He might care about a wedding," Marcus said slowly. "The king loves grand celebrations, especially weddings. If he were to take a personal interest in our engagement, if he were to offer royal patronage—" "You are dreaming," Blackwood said. "Why would the king concern himself with us?" "Because," Marcus said with growing confidence, "he knew my father. They served together in the Flemish wars. I saved the Crown Prince's life once, when we were boys. The king might remember that debt of honor." Elara's eyes began to shine with hope. "Do you really think it might work?" "I think it is our only chance," Marcus replied. but it would mean making our engagement truly public. There would be no going back. Then we had better make sure we truly wish to be engaged, Elara said softly. Marcus moved closer to her, ignoring her father's presence. Elara, I meant what I said last night. I know we have known each other only a day, but I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. Will you marry me? Not as a pretense or a convenience, but because you want to be my wife. She looked into his eyes for a long moment. Yesterday morning I thought my life was over, she said quietly. Then you appeared like a knight from a fairy tale and gave me hope again. I do not know if what I feel is love, but I know I feel safer and happier with you than I have ever felt with anyone else. Is that a yes? Marcus asked, hardly daring to breathe. That is a yes, she whispered. Lord Blackwood cleared his throat loudly. Well then, if you two are quite finished, perhaps we should discuss how to approach the king. Marcus grinned and caught Elara's hands in his. Leave that to me. I know exactly what to do. 3 days later, Marcus stood in the antechamber outside the king's private receiving room. His heart was pounding almost as hard as it had during the duel with Pemberton. Beside him, Elara looked radiant in a gown of deep blue silk that brought out her eyes. Her father stood stiffly on her other side, clearly uncomfortable with the whole business. Lord Marcus Ashford and party, announced the royal page. You may enter. King William sat behind an ornate desk, reading through a stack of papers. He was a man in his 40s, still handsome despite the grey threading through his brown hair. When he looked up and saw Marcus's stern expression softened into a smile. Marcus, the king exclaimed, rising from his chair. It has been far too long. How is that shoulder of yours? Still troubling you from that fall you took saving Charles? Marcus bowed deeply. Your Majesty remembers. The shoulder is fine. Thank you for asking. May I present my betrothed Lady Elara Blackwood and her father Lord Blackwood. Both Elara and her father made formal bows. The king studied Elara with obvious approval. So this is the woman who has finally captured young Ashford's heart, the king said with a warm smile. I was beginning to think he would remain a bachelor forever. Lady Elara, you are even more beautiful than the rumors suggested. Elara blushed prettily. Your Majesty is too kind. Nonsense, the king waved his hand. I have an eye for beauty, and you, my dear, are exceptional. Now then, Marcus, what brings you to court? I assume this is not merely a social call. Marcus took a deep breath. Your Majesty, I come to ask a favor. Lady Elara and I wish to marry, but there are complications. We hoped you might honor us with your interest in our union. The king's eyes sharpened. He had not ruled for 15 years without learning to read between the lines. What sort of complications? Marcus exchanged a glance with Lord Blackwood, who nodded reluctantly. Lord Pemberton claims a prior engagement with Lady Elara. He holds debts that give him leverage over her father. Pemberton, the king said, and his voice hardened. That man is a plague upon my court. I have been looking for an excuse to curtail his influence. He turned to Lord Blackwood. How much do you owe him? 20,000 crowns, Your Majesty, Blackwood said quietly. The king whistled low. A substantial sum, but not insurmountable for a man with the right connections. He walked around his desk and stood before the small group. I have a proposition for you. I am planning a grand celebration for Michaelmas. The court has been too gloomy of late, and I wish to remedy that with a festival of joy and beauty. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. What did you have in mind, Your Majesty? A royal wedding, the king said with a broad smile. Your wedding, to be precise. If you consent to let me sponsor your nuptials, to make them the centerpiece of my celebration, I will personally see to it that Lord Pemberton's claims are resolved. Ilara gasped softly. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. A royal wedding meant the eyes of the entire kingdom would be upon them. It meant pomp and ceremony beyond anything they had imagined. It also meant they could not back out, could not change their minds. "That is incredibly generous, Your Majesty," Marcus managed, "but surely such an honor should go to someone of higher rank." "Nonsense," the king interrupted. "You saved my son's life. That deserves more than a simple knighthood or a purse of gold. Besides, I like the romantic aspect of it all. A brave knight rescues a fair maiden from an unwanted marriage. They fall in love at first sight and live happily ever after. The people will eat it up." Marcus looked at Ilara. Her face was pale but determined. She gave him the slightest nod. "We would be honored, Your Majesty," Marcus said formally. "Excellent." The king clapped his hands together. "Now then, we have much to plan. The wedding will take place in 6 weeks, during the Michaelmas festivities. Lady Ilara, you will need a wardrobe worthy of the occasion. Lord Blackwood, you will find your debts mysteriously paid by an anonymous benefactor within the week. Your Majesty, how can we ever repay such kindness?" Lord Blackwood asked, his voice thick with emotion. "By giving me a wedding to remember," the king replied. "By showing my court what true love looks like. By being an example of happiness in these troubled times." As they left the royal presence, Marcus felt as if he were walking in a dream. In trying to escape one trap, they had walked directly into another. But when he looked at Ilara's shining eyes, he found he did not mind being trapped, as long as it was with her. "A royal wedding," Ilara breathed as they walked through the castle corridors. "I can hardly believe it." "Are you having second thoughts?" Marcus asked quietly, staying close to her side. "About the wedding?" "Never," she replied firmly. "About the royal spectacle of it all, perhaps a little. But Marcus, don't you see what this means? The king himself has declared his support for our union. Pemberton would not dare challenge royal favor." "That is true," Marcus agreed, "but it also means we will be under constant scrutiny. Every gesture, every word will be watched and judged." "Then we had better make sure we are convincing as a couple, madly in love," Ilara said with a smile that made his heart skip. "I do not think that will be difficult," Marcus murmured, catching her hand and bringing it to his lips. The next 6 weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparation. The castle was transformed into a wonderland of flowers and silk banners. Seamstresses worked day and night on Ilara's wedding gown, a confection of ivory silk and seed pearls that would have bankrupted a lesser lord. Marcus found himself fitted for elaborate court dress and tutored in the complex protocols of a royal ceremony. But the most wonderful part was spending time with Ilara. Every day brought new discoveries about each other. He learned that she had a wicked sense of humor and could make him laugh until his sides ached. She discovered that beneath his serious exterior, he was kind and gentle, with a protective streak that made her feel cherished. They spent long afternoons walking in the castle gardens, talking about everything and nothing. Marcus told her about his estates in the north, the tenants he cared for, his dreams of improving their lives. Ilara shared her love of books and learning, her secret wish to travel and see the world beyond England's shores. "After we are married," Marcus said one afternoon as they sat by the fountain in the rose garden, "would you like to visit my lands? They are not as grand as your father's estate, but they are beautiful in their own way." "I would love that," Ilara replied, leaning against his shoulder. "I have spent my whole life in the same places, seeing the same faces. The idea of a new home, a new life, is exciting." "And frightening?" Marcus asked gently. "A little," she admitted, "but less frightening with you beside me." Marcus tilted her chin up so he could look into her eyes. "Ilara, I need you to know something. Whatever happens, however this marriage began, my feelings for you are real. I love you." Her breath caught. "Marcus, you do not have to say anything," he said quickly. "I know this has all happened very fast. I just needed you to know how I feel." "You foolish man," she said softly, reaching up to touch his cheek. "Did you think I was marrying you only for convenience? I love you too." Their second kiss was even more magical than their first. This time there was no audience, no desperation, just the two of them and the promise of forever. But their happiness was shadowed by Lord Pemberton's continued presence at court. The man had not given up his pursuit, despite the king's obvious favor toward Marcus and Elara. He seemed to be waiting for something, watching for any sign of weakness or falsehood in their engagement. "He makes my skin crawl," Elara confided to Marcus one evening as they watched Pemberton across the great hall during dinner. "The way he looks at me, as if I am already his property." "He cannot touch you now," Marcus assured her. "The king's protection is absolute." "I know," Elara said, "but I cannot shake the feeling that he has some plan, some way to disrupt our wedding." Her instincts proved correct. 3 days before the ceremony, Pemberton requested a private audience with the king. Marcus and Elara were not present, but word of what transpired spread quickly through the castle. Pemberton had presented evidence that their engagement was false, that it had been concocted to escape Elara's betrothal to him. He claimed to have witnesses who had seen them meeting for the first time on the very night they announced their engagement. The king had listened to Pemberton's accusations with growing anger, but his rage was not directed at Marcus and Elara. "Are you suggesting," the king had said in a voice of deadly calm, "that I am too stupid to recognize a genuine love match? Are you implying that I have been deceived by a pair of actors playing at romance?" Pemberton had tried to backtrack, but the damage was done. The king had banished him from court permanently and warned him that any further interference in the Ashford-Blackwood union would be considered treason. When Marcus heard the news, he felt weak with relief. But there was also a nagging worry. What if Pemberton was right? What if their love was nothing more than gratitude and convenience, dressed up as romance? What if the pressure of a royal wedding would reveal the cracks in their hastily built relationship? The night before the wedding, Marcus found himself unable to sleep. He walked out onto the balcony of his chamber and stared up at the stars. Tomorrow he would marry the most beautiful woman in the kingdom. Tomorrow he would become the most envied man in England. So why did he feel so afraid? Having second thoughts? A soft voice asked behind him. Marcus turned to find Elara stepping out onto the balcony. She wore a simple white nightgown with a cloak thrown over her shoulders. Her hair hung loose around her face, making her look young and vulnerable. "What are you doing here?" Marcus asked. "It is bad luck for the groom to see the bride before the wedding." "I could not sleep," Elara said, moving to stand beside him at the balcony rail. "I kept thinking about what Pemberton said to the king, about our engagement being false." Marcus felt his heart clench. "Elara, you know that what we have now is real, regardless of how it began." "Do I?" she asked quietly. "Marcus, be honest with me. If circumstances were different, if you had met me at a normal court function, would you have looked twice at me?" Marcus turned to face her fully. "Are you asking if I find you attractive? Because that would be the most ridiculous question ever posed by a woman." Despite her serious mood, Elara smiled. "That is not what I meant, and you know it." "Then what are you asking?" "I am asking if you would have fallen in love with me if we had met under normal circumstances. If there had been no danger, no need for rescue, no dramatic romance to sweep us both away." Marcus considered the question seriously. "I do not know," he said finally, and saw her face fall. "But Elara, that is not the right question." "What do you mean?" I mean that we did not meet under normal circumstances. We met exactly when and how we were supposed to meet. You needed someone to save you, and I needed someone to save. You needed someone to love you for who you are, and I needed someone to teach me what love really means. He took her hands in his. Do you remember what you said to me that first night? You said that anything was better than marriage to Pemberton. Well, I think anything would be worse than losing you now. I do not care how we began. I only care about how we continue. Tears sparkled in her eyes. I am so frightened, Marcus. What if we are making a terrible mistake? What if this fairy tale the king has created falls apart under the weight of reality? Then we will build something new, Marcus said firmly. Something real and lasting and ours, Elara. I am not marrying you because the king commands it, or because it is convenient, or because you are beautiful, though you are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. Why are you marrying me then? She whispered. Because, when I look at you, I see home, Marcus said simply. Because when you smile, the whole world makes sense. Because I would rather spend 1 year as your husband than a lifetime with anyone else. She stood on her toes and kissed him then, soft and sweet under the starlight. I love you too, she whispered against his lips. Whatever comes tomorrow, whatever challenges we face, I want to face them with you. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright. The castle chapel had been transformed into a bower of roses and lilies. Every seat was filled with lords and ladies in their finest clothes. Musicians played softly as the guests took their places. In her chamber, Elara stood before a looking-glass while her maids made final adjustments to her gown. The dress was a masterpiece, flowing around her like captured moonlight. A crown of flowers and pearls held her veil in place. You look like a princess from a storybook, her maid said with tears in her eyes. Elara smiled, but her hands were shaking. In a few minutes she would walk down the aisle and become Lady Ashford. She would promise to love, honor, and obey a man she had known for less than 2 months. It should have terrified her, but instead she felt only excitement. A knock came at the door. "My lady," called a voice. "His Majesty requests your presence." Elara frowned. The king was supposed to escort her to the chapel, but that was not for another hour. "Tell His Majesty I will be ready shortly." "Begging your pardon, my lady, but the king says it is urgent. He is waiting in the solar." Elara exchanged glances with her maid. This was highly irregular, but one did not keep the king waiting. "Very well, bring my cloak." She made her way carefully through the corridors, her elaborate train rustling behind her. The solar was empty except for King William, who stood at the window looking out at the chapel courtyard. "Your Majesty," Elara said, sinking into a curtsy. "You wished to see me?" The king turned, and Elara was surprised to see that he looked troubled. "Elara, my dear child, I am afraid I have some disturbing news." Her heart began to race. "What is wrong? Is Marcus hurt?" "No, nothing like that," the king assured her quickly. "But I have just received word from my spies in the north. Lord Pemberton did not accept his banishment gracefully. He has raised a small army and is marching on Lord Ashford's lands." Elara felt the color drain from her face. "What does that mean?" "It means that your wedding has become more than a romantic celebration," the king said grimly. "It has become a matter of state. By marrying you publicly, with royal blessing, Marcus is making a statement that no one may challenge his claim to you. If Pemberton succeeds in destroying Marcus's estates, it will be seen as a defeat for royal authority." "What are you saying?" Elara asked, though she was beginning to understand. "I am saying that I cannot allow you to back out of this wedding now, even if you wish to," the king said gently. "Too much depends on it. My reputation, Marcus's life. the stability of the northern borders. All of it rests on your marriage proceeding as planned. Elara stared at him. Are you commanding me to marry him? No, the king said, after a long pause. I am asking you to understand the consequences if you do not. If you refuse to go through with the ceremony now, Marcus will be seen as a man who cannot even keep his own betrothed. His authority over his lands will be questioned. Pemberton will be emboldened to greater acts of rebellion. The room seemed to spin around Elara. So I have no choice after all. There is always a choice, the king said softly. But some choices have prices we must be willing to pay. Elara closed her eyes and thought of Marcus. He had saved her from one unwanted marriage, only to trap them both in another kind of prison. But this prison had bars made of love and honor instead of fear and greed. I understand, Your Majesty, she said finally, and my answer has not changed. I wish to marry Lord Ashford. You are certain? The king asked. Because once you walk down that aisle, once the vows are spoken before God and witnesses, there can be no undoing it. The marriage will be real in every sense. Then we had better make sure it is a good marriage, Elara said with a courage she did not entirely feel. The king smiled and offered her his arm. Come then, my dear, let us go make history. The chapel was packed to overflowing. Every noble family in the kingdom seemed to be represented. Elara walked slowly down the aisle on the king's arm, her eyes fixed on Marcus waiting at the altar. He looked magnificent in his wedding finery, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the worry lines around his eyes. He knew about Pemberton's army too. When they reached the altar, the king placed Elara's hand in Marcus's and stepped back. The priest began the ancient ceremony, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed chapel. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the joining of Marcus and Elara in holy matrimony. Elara tried to focus on the words, but her mind kept wandering. Was she doing the right thing? Was this marriage truly what she wanted, or was she simply choosing the lesser of two evils? When it came time for her vows, would she be able to speak them with conviction? Lord Ashford, the priest intoned, do you take Lady Elara to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, till death do you part? I do, Marcus said firmly, his eyes never leaving Elara's face. Lady Elara, the priest continued, do you take Lord Ashford to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love, honor and obey, till death do you part? The chapel fell completely silent. Every person in the room held their breath, waiting for her answer. Elara looked into Marcus's eyes and saw not just love, but understanding. He knew the impossible position she was in. He knew that her yes would be as much duty as desire. But she also saw something else in his gaze, a promise, a vow that went beyond the formal words they were speaking, a pledge that he would spend the rest of his life trying to make her happy, trying to turn this marriage of necessity into a union of joy. I do, she said clearly, and heard the collective sigh of relief from the assembled guests. The priest smiled and raised his hands. By the power vested in me by God and King, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride, Lord Ashford. Marcus stepped closer and lifted her veil with gentle hands. Hello, wife, he whispered, so softly only she could hear. Hello, husband, she whispered back. Their kiss was soft and sweet, a promise of tenderness to come. When they broke apart, the chapel erupted in cheers and applause. Rose petals rained down from the gallery above, filling the air with color and fragrance. As they turned to face their guests, Elara caught sight of a familiar figure near the back of the chapel. Lord Pemberton stood in the shadows, his face twisted with rage and hatred. But he was alone, and surrounded by royal guards. Whatever army he had raised, it was not here. The king noticed her gaze and leaned close. "Do not worry about him," he murmured. "He will not trouble you again." The wedding feast that followed was a magnificent affair. Course after course of elaborate dishes appeared on the tables. Musicians played and acrobats performed. The wine flowed freely and the laughter grew louder as the evening progressed. Marcus and Alara sat at the high table, accepting congratulations and gifts from their guests. But beneath the celebration, both were aware of the sword hanging over their heads. Pemberton's rebellion in the north had not been stopped, only delayed. "My lord and lady," the king said, rising from his seat with a goblet in his hand, "I call for a toast to the happy couple. May their love be an example to us all, and may their marriage bring joy and prosperity to the realm." Everyone raised their cups and drank. As the king sat down, he leaned close to Marcus and spoke quietly. "I have sent word to my commanders in the north. Pemberton's little rebellion will be crushed within the month. You need not worry about your lands." "Thank you, your majesty," Marcus replied. "But I think I should ride north as soon as possible. My people need to see that I am not hiding behind royal protection." "Absolutely not," the king said firmly. "You have just been married. You will remain here for the full week of celebrations, and then you will take your bride on a proper wedding journey. The north can wait." Marcus wanted to argue, but Alara placed a restraining hand on his arm. "His Majesty is right," she said quietly. "We have duties here as well as there." The dancing began shortly after the feast ended. Marcus led Alara onto the floor for the first dance, a stately pavan that required them to move in intricate patterns around each other. Despite all her worries, Alara found herself enjoying the movement and music. "You dance beautifully," Marcus said, as they came together in the center of the formation. "So do you," Alara replied, "though I suspect you would rather be planning military campaigns than dancing pavanis." "What makes you think that?" Marcus asked with a smile. "The way you keep glancing toward the windows, as if you expect to see enemy banners on the horizon," Alara said softly. Marcus looked chagrined. "I am sorry, I do not mean to be distracted on our wedding day." "Our wedding day," Alara repeated thoughtfully. "It has a nice sound to it, does it not?" "Yes," Marcus agreed, "though I confess I never imagined my wedding would involve quite so much political intrigue." "Nor I," Alara said with a laugh. "When I was a little girl, I dreamed of a simple ceremony in the village church, followed by a quiet celebration with family and friends. And instead you got a royal spectacle with half the kingdom watching," Marcus said ruefully. "I got you," Alara said simply. "Everything else is just decoration." The dance ended, and they bowed to each other formally. Around them, other couples took the floor for the next set. Marcus offered Alara his arm, and they walked to the edge of the hall where they could speak more privately. "Alara," Marcus said seriously, "I need you to know something. Whatever the king said about political necessity, whatever pressure you felt to go through with this ceremony, I want you to know that my feelings for you are unchanged. I married you because I love you, not because I had to." "I know," Alara said softly, "and I married you for the same reason. But Marcus, I am frightened. Not of you, not of marriage, but of what comes next. We are husband and wife now, but we are also strangers in many ways. What if we discover we do not suit each other as well as we hoped? Then we will learn to suit each other," Marcus said confidently. "Alara, I do not believe in fairy tales that end with the wedding. I believe in the hard work that comes after. I believe in choosing to love someone every day, not just in the moment of passion." You make it sound so simple, Elara said, with a wistful smile. Perhaps it is simple, Marcus replied. Perhaps we are the ones making it complicated. Before Elara could respond, a commotion near the hall's entrance caught their attention. A dusty messenger had arrived and was speaking urgently to one of the king's guards. The guard hurried to the high table and whispered something in the king's ear. The king's face went pale. He rose from his chair and called for silence. The music stopped, and all conversation ceased. "My lords and ladies," the king announced, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed hall. "I have just received grave news from the north. Lord Pemberton's forces have attacked and burned the village of Millbrook. Many innocent people have died." A gasp went up from the assembled guests. Millbrook was one of Marcus's villages, home to several hundred of his tenants. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Furthermore, the king continued, Pemberton has declared that he will continue his attacks until Lady Elara is turned over to him as his rightful wife. He claims that today's ceremony was invalid because it was performed under duress. Elara gripped Marcus's arm tightly. Around them, the wedding guests murmured in shock and outrage. The joyous celebration had suddenly become a war council. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, stepping forward, "I must ride north immediately. My people are under attack because of me." "No," the king said firmly. "You will not give Pemberton the satisfaction of disrupting your wedding night. My forces are already moving to crush this rebellion. You will remain here until it is safe." "But your Majesty," Marcus began. "I have spoken," the king interrupted, and his tone brooked no argument. "However, I understand your concern for your people. Therefore, I am making a royal proclamation." He gestured to a herald, who stepped forward with a scroll. "Let it be known throughout the realm," the herald announced in a loud voice, "that any attack upon the lands or people of Lord and Lady Ashford is an attack upon the crown itself. Lord Pemberton and his followers are hereby declared traitors and outlaws. A reward of 1,000 gold crowns is offered for Pemberton's capture, dead or alive." The hall erupted in cheers. Marcus felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. With royal forces hunting him and a massive bounty on his head, Pemberton would not be able to sustain his rebellion for long. "And now," the king continued with a smile, "let us return to our celebration. This is a wedding, not a wake. Musicians, play something lively." The music resumed, but the mood had shifted. The carefree joy of earlier in the evening had been replaced by a more sober awareness of the dangers facing the new couple. Many guests approached Marcus and Elara to offer their support and pledge their own forces if needed. As the evening wore on, Elara found herself growing more and more anxious. Not about Pemberton's threats, but about what would happen when the celebration ended. Soon she and Marcus would retire to the bridal chamber that had been prepared for them. They would be alone together as husband and wife for the first time. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. She loved Marcus. She was certain of that now, but love and physical intimacy were two different things. What if she disappointed him? What if the passion she felt when he kissed her was not enough? Marcus seemed to sense her growing nervousness. As midnight approached, he leaned close and spoke quietly in her ear. "We do not have to do anything you are not ready for," he said gently. "Being married does not mean you owe me anything." Elara looked at him in surprise. "But surely you expect—" "I expect nothing," Marcus said firmly. "I hope for everything, but I expect nothing. Elara, I want our first time together to be perfect for both of us. If that means waiting until you are truly ready, then we will wait." Tears sprang to her eyes. "How did I get so lucky?" "I think I am the lucky one," Marcus replied with a tender smile. The bedding ceremony, thankfully, was more symbolic than literal. The king had decreed that the couple should be spared the traditional embarrassment of being escorted to their chamber by drunken wedding guests. Instead, they were allowed to slip away quietly when the festivities reached their peak. The bridal chamber had been prepared with care. Candles flickered softly throughout the room, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Rose petals had been scattered on the bed, and a fire crackled warmly in the hearth. A table held wine and delicate pastries for the couple to share. Clara stood uncertainly in the middle of the room while Marcus closed and locked the door behind them. The reality of their situation suddenly hit her with full force. They were married, they were alone, and despite everything that had led to this moment, she wanted to be here. "Would you like some wine?" Marcus asked, moving to the table. "Please," Alara said, grateful for something to do with her hands. Marcus poured 2 goblets and handed one to her. Their fingers brushed as she took it, sending a little thrill through her. "To us," he said, raising his cup. "To us," she echoed, and they drank. The wine was sweet and warming. Alara felt some of her tension begin to ease. Marcus set down his goblet and moved closer to her. "May I help you with your gown?" he asked softly. Alara nodded, not trusting her voice. She turned her back to him and felt his gentle fingers working at the dozens of tiny buttons that ran down her spine. Each touch sent shivers through her. When the gown finally loosened and slipped from her shoulders, she felt exposed and vulnerable despite the shift she still wore. Marcus's breath caught as he looked at her. "You are so beautiful," he whispered. Alara turned to face him, her cheeks burning with embarrassment and desire. "I do not know what to do," she admitted. "I have never." "Neither have I," Marcus confessed, and her eyes widened in surprise. "Oh, I have kissed a few girls at harvest festivals, but nothing more. I wanted to wait for someone special." "And am I special?" Alara asked softly. "You are everything," Marcus replied, cupping her face in his hands. "You are my heart, my hope, my future." He kissed her then, soft and sweet at first, then with growing passion as she responded. Her hands found the fastenings of his doublet and began working them loose. Soon they were both in their shifts, skin warm and glowing in the candlelight. Marcus lifted her in his arms and carried her to the bed, laying her down gently on the rose petals. "Are you certain?" he asked one last time. "We can still wait if you prefer." "I am certain," Alara whispered, pulling him down to her. "I want to be your wife in every way." What followed was tender and sweet, a gentle exploration of love and desire. Marcus was patient and caring, making sure of her comfort and pleasure before his own. When they finally came together as one, Alara felt as if her heart might burst with joy and love. Afterward, they lay entwined in the candlelight, talking softly and sharing kisses. The rose petals had been scattered by their movements, creating a fragrant carpet around the bed. "I love you, Lady Ashford," Marcus murmured against her hair. "I love you too, Lord Ashford," Alara replied, snuggling closer to his warmth. Outside, the wedding celebrations continued into the small hours of the morning. But inside the bridal chamber, the newlyweds had found their own perfect celebration, one that would last a lifetime. The next morning brought news that Pemberton's rebellion had collapsed. Faced with royal forces and the massive bounty on his head, his followers had deserted him. He had been captured, trying to flee to France, and was now awaiting trial for treason. "It is over," Marcus said as he read the message. "We are truly free." Alara smiled and kissed his cheek. "No, my darling husband, it is just beginning." And as the sun rose on their first day as a married couple, Marcus and Alara looked forward to a future filled with love, laughter, and the promise of happily ever after. What had begun as a desperate lie had become the truest thing in both their lives. They had agreed to pose as fiancés to escape an unwanted fate, but in the end, they had found something far more precious than freedom. They had found each other. The king had announced their wedding date, but what he had really given them was the chance to discover that sometimes the best love stories begin with the most unlikely circumstances. And sometimes, just sometimes, fairy tales do come true.